Welcome to Racial and Social Justice Beyond the Dome. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Dan Yu, and here with Marilee Williams, president of the Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh. Tonight, we welcome Greg Burke and Michael DeLeon. They are most famously known for being co-plaintiffs in the Obergefell v. Hodges Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriages in the United States. They are also parents and have been together for 40 years. Greg's book, Gay, Catholic, and American, is being published by Notre Dame Press and will be officially released on September 1st. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having us, Dan. We're honored to be here, and we so much appreciate the series that you're doing. You're dealing with a lot of difficult topics. There are things that people want to talk about, and thank you for bringing the discussion to us.
Well, this is great. This is great to have you both on. First, I'd love to start just so that people know who you guys are. What do you both do professionally?
I'll start. I'm currently working for Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield as a health economist. I retired from Humana military healthcare after 24 years with Humana about 3 years ago and started over with a new employer, but healthcare economics for pretty much all of my career.
Gotcha. Again, my name is Michael DeLeon. I work in IT as a project manager. I work for GE Appliances, a hire company. So that's key. I worked for General Electric for 27 years, and then they sold us about 5 or 6 years ago. And then, I've stayed with that company. And right now I'm leading security projects. So, we're just really busy in the security space with IT. And I've been there, total of 32 years.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So Michael, I'd love to hear your origin story. Where did you grow up?
I was an Army brat. My heritage is Mexican American, and my parents grew up in a real small town in Southeast Texas. And at 17, my dad decided, I'm not staying in this town. I'm going to, join the Army. So he actually joined the Army, and then a year or so later, he married my mother, and they never looked back. We wound up in Kentucky. Just because that was one of his last duty stations, and he kind of wandered into a real estate office and fell in love with a farm. So, I grew up partly as an Army brat till I was about 12, and then grew up on the farm and went to the University of Kentucky. That's where we met. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Greg.
Well, my story is not nearly as exciting. I was born in Louisville, grew up here, attended Catholic schools here with my 3 brothers. We went to St. Stephen Martyr Elementary, St. Xavier High School, and then after that, I attended the University of Louisville as an undergraduate, where I got my undergraduate degree. And then it was after that that I moved on to Notre Dame, where I got a graduate degree. So, and then eventually the UK for another degree, where I met Michael. So, kind of all the pieces fit together nicely. But I'm a native of Louisville. I consider myself Southern and Irish Catholic, stock, basically.
And so how did you get to Notre Dame?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. I got tired of the warm weather. I just thought I wanted to try something a little bit different, and South Bend offered it all. I think I mentioned I come from an Irish American background, Catholic. I always wanted to go to Notre Dame, but coming directly out of high school, I didn't apply just because I didn't have enough confidence, I think, that I would get accepted, nor did I know that I could afford that. I mean, that was a real issue. So I was offered an academic scholarship at the University of Louisville, and I had it first. But when it came time for graduate school, I thought I'd roll the dice and try Notre Dame, and boy, it sure worked out for me well. I'm so grateful for that.
That's great. And so how did you guys meet? How did you two meet?
We actually met at a gay bar in Lexington, Kentucky. We were both students at the University of Kentucky, and interestingly enough, that bar is still open. So, it's called The Bar, and it's had several names throughout its history. But we met at this bar, and I know one of your questions was who proposed, but we'll back it up a little bit as far as who asked who. Yeah, I actually asked Greg to dance. So that was the beginning right there, when I think who knows what the song was. I can't remember. Do you?
I don't
remember.
Yeah. A throwaway song. It didn't matter.
Many years later, in 2004, you went to Canada to get married. But at that time in your home state, same-sex marriage was banned by a new constitutional amendment, as I understand it.
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
right. Yes. So, just kind of frame what your last question about proposal in marriage. When we met in 1982, we didn't know any same-sex couples at all who were together. I mean, it was very, very uncommon in those days for people to kind of pair off and couple up and kind of set up house like we did. It was done, but very, very rarely. We didn't know anyone. So it wasn't a traditional type of partnership in terms of starting and moving through progression as married couples often do. But we did. And by 2004, we had already adopted 2 children. So not only have we been together for 24 years, but we had 2 adopted children. And so that's when we decided we want to go to the only place in North America where we could legally get married. That was Ontario, Canada at that particular time, and actually get married. And there's a backstory to that, which we like to tell because we think it's important. And I don't know if you want to talk about that. About the whole Kentucky amendment. So the Commonwealth of Kentucky in 2003 was building towards a state constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage.
And it passed overwhelmingly. I think it was 75% of the Kentucky population, voted in favor of instituting this ban for gay marriage. So that's pretty huge. And, our kids were not of an age of understanding fully, but we had a sign in the yard, and our sign was stolen, and they were outraged just the fact that somebody would take something out of your yard, but they did understand when we said we were going to get married. They kind of thought we already were, just because in their world they're living with their parents, and everybody just if your bubble, everybody's parents are married, you can assume yours are too. And that's kind of where they stood. And it was spring break when we got married, 2004, up in Niagara Falls, and it was a nice little trip. The hotel was nice, and they had a great pool, indoor pool, obviously. And to them, it was an adventure, and the ceremony was just a brief part of that adventure.
That's great. So did you guys get to do the boat under the falls and all that?
It wasn't that time of year. So we got married on March 29th, and they didn't have the boats running yet. It was quite chilly.
Yeah.
And we were obviously on the Canadian side because we had to go to Canada to get married. We couldn't get married in America. So it was a little unpleasant. But after South Bend, it wasn't that bad.
Actually, we had good weather while we were there.
So now you come back to the States, and then someone approached you, right, to be plaintiffs to challenge the amendment. And what was that about?
Yeah, I'll tell that story just from because it started with my HR person at work. We were talking about the Edie Windsor case, and how big that was, and obviously the next step was to challenge marriage, and we were just talking about it, and we actually named off some other male and female couples that we knew, and then later she popped by my desk and she said, hey, I've got a friend who knows some attorneys, and they're looking for a couple. They've had a couple that entertained it, and then they backed off just because they weren't ready for that kind of exposure, or they weren't out to their families and friends. And so that's where that kind of started with us. And we exchanged with these 2 attorneys, Don Elliott and Shannon Fauber were these attorneys, and we wound up filing with them in it was warm, because I remember we were doing B-roll and stuff.
July. It was the end of July of 2013. It was precisely 1 month after the Windsor decision, because the Supreme Court had to allow 30 days for there was some kind of a challenge period. So any lawsuits that wanted to use that as precedent had to wait 30 days. So we waited exactly 30 days after the Windsor filing when our case was filed.
Yeah.
And so the 2 of you were the only plaintiffs in all of the South at that time challenging any ban
challenge. Yes, that's correct. So we were the first case in a southern state to challenge a state constitutional ban against same-sex marriage. It was unexpected. I think a lot of people didn't really approve of what we did. Certainly in Kentucky, we weren't popular because a vast majority of Kentuckians were opposed to same-sex marriage. So it wasn't popular in the state of Kentucky. And the people who were the architects or considered themselves the architects of the marriage equality movement and the LGBT community did not approve of what we did. They thought Kentucky was kind of a lost cause. So yeah, so there's a lot of this that I talk about in the book, the fact that we really didn't receive any support through much of our case as it progressed through the court system, because everybody was against us. They thought we were going to lose, we didn't have a chance. And honestly, we were told numerous times that this kind of a case was going to do more harm than good, because if and when we lost, it would set back the movement.
Yeah, because unbeknownst to us, the major players in fighting the marriage equality at a national level, they actually had a roadmap. They were all working together, and they had certain states where it was going to be on the ballot and they would win that way, and then other states, they were going to move it, through the courts, but in their eyes, they saw better chances of winning in those states and creating kind of a large population or a large number of states with marriage equality and moving it forward that way. So we weren't on the roadmap, but we joke that we made our own entrance ramp. So it's but we didn't know that. Our attorneys weren't connected to that either. They just saw the need. Here we are in Kentucky, and that they were passionate and we were passionate, and other plaintiffs joined us pretty quickly as well. So it was a rude awakening to us, I guess, to realize that the other LGBT organizations would have discomfort with what we were trying to do,
and actually go as far as to criticize our efforts to try to get this done, with really not any sympathy for us as individuals, as people, as a couple with a family. It's like, we had our reasons for doing what we did also, which we were very important to us. Our family was the whole reason behind our filing the lawsuit. It's so important.
Right. But so now you've got the constitutional amendment that you're trying to fight, and then you're not getting any support from your own community. That's got to be two big hills to climb at the same time, right? For you, and then you still were able to move forward in the court system, right? And so I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the themes and practical issues around same-sex marriage, right? So you adopted 2 children, your parents. There's issues of health benefits and survivorship, all of these things. And this is besides the life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and 14th Amendment, right? Equal protections under the law. But if you could tell, I guess, the audience some of the themes that you were really moved by.
Well, the first and primary reason for our filing the lawsuit was for the safety and security of our family. In the Commonwealth of Kentucky, then in 2013, when we filed, as it is now, you cannot have 2 people co-adopt a child unless they are married. So by virtue of the fact that the Commonwealth of Kentucky would not recognize us as being married, they would not allow us to co-adopt our children. So what that meant was that only one of us could be a legal parent. When that happens, you expose your children to so much risk. If something happens to that parent, if that parent becomes incapacitated or passes, then there's no guarantee that that child or those children are going to stay in the custody of the other parent, illegal parent or not recognized parent. Right. So for 16 years in our family, we were raising children, and Michael was the legal adoptive parent, and I was just a guardian. Our family was at great risk if something was to happen to him. So that was our motivation with the lawsuit. That's one of only many concerns. You talked about a lot of other issues. as we moved our way through the courts and we finally did get the support of some LGBT organizations like HRC, they kept pointing out that there are over 1,000 benefits and privileges that come from being recognized as a legal marriage, as a legal couple. And so that's just one of them. There are all other kinds of things like, inheritance, just for us as a couple, and that's what the Edie Windsor case was about to start with. The fact that, Edie's partner died and she had to pay some exorbitant estate taxes for inheriting her spouse's funds. So, there are issues like that. Just simple things like income taxes, I'll tell you, because I've done our taxes for almost 40 years now. And I can't tell you how much money it saves. Well, I can tell you it's about $4,000 to $5,000 every year less in taxes we pay now that we can file as a married couple. So when you consider the fact we've been together for 40 years, we've been paying a tax mostly because of our children and our family, because we were forced to file single and separately. So there are just so many aspects to the benefits of being recognized as a married couple. Never mind, just the social status that goes with being recognized as married, but just the legal benefits.
Plus, we had added additional costs, like for lawyer fees, because we had to kind of legally, best we could, kind of guarantee that Greg could be a parent. Written powers of attorney, medical powers of attorney. He had to get like healthcare surrogate, I guess, in his glove compartment, when he took him to the, once our medical doctors, the pediatricians knew who we were and everything, but if there was an emergency, him as not a legal parent, he had to have, some kind of documentation, and all that, cost lawyer fees and things like that. So there's some cost avoidance as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a burden that many same-sex couples faced, that we knew of through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Until they were actually achieved marriage equality. It's like we had to go to great lengths to create these legal documents and legal arrangements so that we could kind of simulate marriage, so that we could have some of the benefits. But it was very expensive, and not everybody could afford to do it. It's just one more tax that we had to pay.
So it's almost like a reverse tax, right? Against same-sex couples. And so now the journey goes from the state of Kentucky, and then it goes to the higher courts. Tell us about that journey.
Well, the first thing to point out is that we actually won in Kentucky, which was a great surprise. So Burke versus Bashir, we got a favorable ruling from Judge Haburn here. Surprised everyone. This was a Republican-appointed judge by Ronald Reagan, very conservative. So when he ruled in our favor, it really raised a lot of eyebrows. There's a lot of detail about that I read about in my book, about some of the politics around that, and should that get appealed by the state or should that not get appealed by the state? We were hopeful that when we got that win at the district court level, that would be the end of it, and we would have same-sex marriage in Kentucky. But our governor decided that he was going to appeal that decision to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and so we went to the Sixth Circuit. For those who don't know, our case was combined. So our case in Kentucky eventually added other plaintiffs. So we ended up with 4 couples from Kentucky who were seeking marriage recognition from legal marriages in other jurisdictions. So those 4 couples, and then another 2 couples filed an amendment case seeking marriage recognition. So we had 6 couples from Kentucky that moved on to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and then on to the Supreme Court with 3 other states. So as we moved from venue to venue, we picked up more plaintiffs and more states, and we kind of built momentum as we went. But what really threw all of us for a loop, I think, was at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati, which is the second step out of 3. We lost our case. We were overturned, and so that put us in the situation of, what do we do now? And we did have some options. We could have stayed in the Sixth Circuit and asked for a broader panel to review the case, but the other 3 states and the state of Kentucky got together and we said, no, we're going to appeal this. We're going to try to take it to the United States Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court previously had denied cases like that those that had been ruled on at the appellate court level, but they didn't have a case yet where there was an overturning of a lower court. So ours was the first case that came into that view of the Supreme Court where there was a reversal. And so that's why it became a compelling case for the US Supreme Court to take on our case, because there was not that agreement. Universally, so many people may or may not remember, but in 2013, 14, 15, there were a lot of decisions that were being ruled in favor of same-sex marriage in states all across the country. And most of those, were let stand or appealed and then were not taken up on it. So this was the first one that really kind of met the muster of the US Supreme Court, that it's like, yeah, this meets all the criteria that they were looking for. And it was something that they were willing to listen to.
Yeah, because by the time that, we went to the Supreme Court, they were like 32, I believe, is the number of states who had legal marriage. So, slowly, those states, like Greg said, they kept winning at the circuit court, and then the Supreme Court wasn't taking them. Right. So then that deemed that circuit court ruling held in those states.
Right. But they rolled fast, because when we filed our lawsuit in 2013, I think there were only about 15 or 17 states where you could legally get same-sex marriage. So between that point, 2013, and then 2015, when we got our judgment, it's like there was this wave of recognition of same-sex marriage across the country. So this was just the last step that had to be made, and it had to cover states like Kentucky, like Tennessee, Ohio, and Michigan, which were the other states that were part of that case, where the only way it was ever going to happen in our lifetime was with a Supreme Court decision, because those state legislatures would not pass that kind of legislation.
Yeah, Mississippi, Alabama, you can probably name the states that were all with us there at the end.
So it goes from the Sixth Circuit, and then you get to the Supreme Court. What was it like to be there for arguments?
Wow.
Yeah, we were there, like you said, we were there for arguments, and, our kids went with us, but unfortunately there weren't like, we figured as plaintiffs, we would have, prime seats for the entire arguments, but, the way it works, I guess there's a lot of other people, in line as well. And we wound up just going for, our particular case, the recognition of marriage argument that Mary Bonato, she did that one. Yeah. And our kids, they went with us, but they had to hang out with all the other kids, because I think there was like 7 or 9 kids who are all plaintiffs, and they hung out in the Supreme Court cafeteria in the basement. But they weren't crazy about that, but but they did, not to skip ahead too much, but they were able to go to the actual ruling. Both of our kids were there with us.
Right. And Michael mentioned that, you asked what it was like to be there, and he mentioned that there were a lot of plaintiffs there. So a lot of people don't understand that Obergefell v. Hodges, most often they think of Jim Obergefell. But there were 37 plaintiffs who were part of that case, 37. So there were 30 adults and 7 youth plaintiffs from 4 different states that were part of that case. So on argument day, which you asked about, we had all of our plaintiffs in DC, and it was a glorious thing. We got some great pictures out front on the steps. There were huge rallies taking place all the time we were there. In the lead up to oral arguments, people on both sides. So there were people who were very much opposed to same-sex marriage, including some organized Catholic groups who were there protesting against same-sex marriage. But there were also many, many more people there in favor of and being there to support the arguments of what was going on. So the actual experience in court was dramatic. Unfortunately, you can't take pictures, so we only have our memories to go on, but it was quite an interesting argument. You can read the transcripts if you like to do that type of thing. I've read them a couple of times. They're very entertaining. But, it was kind of the culmination of having been gay. I came out when I was 19 years old. So I was in my 50s by the time we got to this point in court. And by, between 19 and being in my 50s, I had heard every argument for and against, gays and queers and same-sex marriage. Like I'd heard it all. And it was just like, it was all right there. And that, a couple of hours we had to listen to arguments. And so then it was up to the justices to listen to those arguments and say, okay, what makes sense here? But yeah, it was quite an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to play a clip of Justice Anthony Kennedy delivering the decision.
It's most often through democracy that liberty is preserved and protected in our lives. Yet there's been substantial public deliberation over the past decades, and it is a central premise of our Constitution that fundamental rights depend on the outcome of no elections. The dynamic of our constitutional system is that individuals need not await legislative action before asserting a fundamental right. Of course, those who oppose same-sex marriage, whether on religious or secular grounds, they continue to advocate that belief with the utmost conviction. In turn, those who believe allowing same-sex marriage is proper may engage those who disagree with their view in an open and searching debate. This case concerns only what states may do under the Constitution. No union is more profound than marriage, for it embodies the highest ideals of love, fidelity, devotion, sacrifice, and family. In forming a marital union, two people become something greater than they once were and would misunderstand petitioners to say that they disrespect or diminish the idea of marriage in these cases. Their plea is that they do respect it. They respect it so deeply, they seek to find its fulfillment for themselves. They ask for equal dignity in the eyes of the law, and the Constitution grants them that right.
So no union is more profound than marriage, right? I think that's, that kind of sums it up, right? That, that level of dignity, right? As he mentioned.
Right. That clip is just so emotional to us. We were actually in court when Justice Kennedy read that. It was, I just get choked up every time I hear it. And one thing couple things I'll say about that. First is, whether you know it or not, that clip gets used a lot in same-sex marriages. So we've been to several cases where people in their vows are using excerpts from what you just played.
Yeah.
And it's so dramatic to us to go to an event like that because we were so directly involved with the case, and to hear people recognize the profoundness of those words and to want to include that in their ceremonies. It's very moving. But his point is, and I totally believe this from our perspective and the other plaintiffs, is that we weren't there because we disrespected marriage and we wanted to tear down the institution. We were there because we felt like we deserved access to that same institution, and it had been denied to us. It wasn't that we wanted to do any harm to it. There was no, evil agenda. It was just a simple question of equality and equal treatment under the law. That's really all we were seeking for ourselves. But those words are truly profound, and that's the good news. But the other side of that is, if you're in court, then you have to listen to Judge John Roberts give his dissenting opinion, which you probably don't want to play because it was not very charitable.
Yeah. In court, I mentioned there was the four of us, our two kids. So our two kids were actually in between Greg and I, so the court is very solemn. There's no outbursts. There's, they have a lot of security, and, they demand a certain decorum in there. But our older son, he wasn't, I guess he didn't get a few of the key words because he needed to make sure we won. So, he was mouthing to Greg and I, did we win? Did we win? And then when the dissent was read, he's pretty expressive, and he was really making some faces at some of the arguments that Justice Roberts was putting forward. So that, and then we had to sit and wait till there were a couple other cases that were ruled on that day. But it was just, an unbelievable life event to be in the courtroom for that ruling.
But then you went outside and then celebrated with your family and the other plaintiffs and probably the crowds too.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Yeah. on that particular day, so there were 37 plaintiffs there for oral arguments, but when the decision gets rendered, you don't know exactly when that's going to be. So on the day of the decision, there were only, so Jim Obergefell was there, our family was there, 4 of us, and then 2 other plaintiffs from Ohio were there. So we weren't all there. It was a relatively small number of plaintiffs who were actually able to be there on that particular day. But it was so special for us to be able to participate in that. And like you said, we got outside and there was pandemonium. I mean, there were thousands of people, and probably that many press, at least it seemed like, who were there to cover it, because people were expecting that decision to come down. And it was very moving.
Right. And we were actually denied that opportunity. You know how you see people walking down the steps of the front of the Supreme Court? Well, the crowd had just stormed the steps and stormed the Supreme Court there, and so we had to go out like a side door in the back and then work our way back around front. So I always picture like Edie Windsor and those the plaintiffs from Prop 8 and stuff coming down the steps. It's like, oh God, we didn't get to do that. But,
well, it was, I'm sure it was a very moving day, right? With celebrating with all the people there. That's got to be great. So this month is Pride Month. And so I'm sure it's a busy time for you with, what are you working on these days? We get the book coming out, but what's going on with you?
Right. Well, I think we already talked about the fact that we're both corporate slaves. So, we're still working and that takes up a lot of our time. Other than that, I've been spending a lot of time with the book, working on lining up book events. Unbeknownst to me, much of that duty falls on the author. It's not done by the publisher. So I've been spending a lot of time trying to line up different events. Had some pretty good luck with a couple bookstores, a lot of universities I'm going to be appearing at, talking about the book. So that's keeping me extremely busy. Plus we have, we still have 2 adult children, and, they take up a certain amount of our time as well.
Yeah. And, I in addition to my job, I have 2 hobbies that keep me in the dirt, I say. I garden. I've got a small backyard garden, and fight with squirrels and rabbits, and then I do pottery as well. I've got a home studio, and then I also go to a studio here in town to work. So
that's great. So
you've been together. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was gonna say, when you've been together for 40 years, it's like that's what your life becomes. And you just get out to hanging out at home, you're gardening, you're potting, and that's about it.
Yeah. So what do you think about the possibility that the church might one day recognize or bless same-sex marriage?
I don't think we've ever been closer. And you say that like it's something that might happen at some point, in the next century. And it's like, I really don't think that's the case. I think we're very, very close to that. I'll tell you from my personal experience that I never thought I'd see gay marriage in my life, and look at us now. There are so many things that have happened in my life that have surprised me, especially, in the last 20 years. It's like, I do believe it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen fast, because what we're seeing now a lot in the Catholic Church is a lot of voices who are stepping up and saying, yes, this is something we need to do. And it's not just one person or 2 people. It's quite a few people all over the world, not just in America. Yeah. So, you talk about the polls. It's like, if you look at the polls, most American Catholics are in favor of same-sex marriage. And I'm sure most of them wouldn't have any problem with the church deciding to bless same-sex marriages. But we're not there yet. I understand, we've got a few more steps to get through, but to answer your question, I believe it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime or not. It doesn't matter to us, because in our mind, we're already married in God's eyes. So that's what's important to us.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting right now is, though, you have clergy stepping forward. They've always fallen in line with whatever, the Vatican is saying. And now you have individuals, like Greg says, across the world who are speaking up and saying, no, this isn't right. And then, you've got, the Catholic, parishioners out there, like at our parish. We have a lot of parishioners who, whenever the Pope says or the church says something negative, well, here's like, we've got your back, so don't forget that.
We got that. Back in March, when the Vatican issued its statement about not blessing same-sex marriage because it would be, quote, blessing sin. We got emails from our fellow parishioners. We were at church. People came up to us, they comforted us and consoled us, and just we're getting a whole different message in our church and in the people that we associate with. That it's past time for this kind of persecution and condemnation of same-sex couples. It's really time just to move on and move past it and accept it.
Yeah, especially as people, parishioners who are Greg and I, age, they have, they might have a child who's come out recently, and then they're really grateful for us to have been there all along, to be, at least a couple in church that's somewhat of a role model. Their child might not know us real well, but they at least have seen an example, of a same-sex couple, still participating in liturgy in the parish.
Well, the church really is community, right? It's not necessarily a building, right? It's about the community, and 70%, I believe that was the last poll. 70% of Catholic Americans approve of same-sex marriage. And so, where do you see the future of Notre Dame recognizing the LGBTQ community?
Well, Notre Dame's never really been a leader in that area, I don't think. So I think it's fair to say that they're going to follow. But what we do see are other Catholic institutions starting to kind of open the door and welcome queer people in. And one of the encouraging things that we're seeing in our church, for example, our parish, we launched an LGBT ministry, which is one of only a few in the country, but they're growing. We have 2 in Kentucky, there are others throughout the country, but the institution itself is starting to change. And I think Notre Dame, when it sees other Catholic institutions, other Catholic colleges start to change, I think it will change more rapidly. And to give credit to Notre Dame, it's made quite a few changes over the last 10 years, especially, to be more welcoming and inclusive to LGBTQ people. There's a lot more to do. And the big hurdle obviously is going to be marriage recognition. And so that's really, that's not Notre Dame's role, really, I don't think, to lead on that necessarily. I mean, that's not their decision to make. I mean, they could make a stand. They probably should make a stand on that. But, they have, a broad base of people that they need to relate to. And I just can't see them taking a leading role on that. But, when other institutions start to recognize same-sex marriages and bless those, then I think they'll get on board with it.
Interestingly, though, as a spouse of a ND alumni, I'm recognized through the association for my birthday, and for other dates, that they treat us as a couple for a lot of their outreach, which is interesting because it's.
He gets a birthday card from the NDAA. It's really nice, and that happened even before. I mean, because I've been pushing these buttons for a lot of years at the Alumni Association, and so this has been going on for a long time, long before we ever filed a lawsuit for same-sex marriage. So
your book, Gay, Catholic, and American. Do you have a copy there?
Oh, I forgot to bring it. Do you have the cover I sent you? Can you share that? I left it upstairs.
I don't. I thought you'd hold it up.
I'll tell you about it while he goes to get it.
Sure. Well, it's a wonderful picture of the two of you in raised arms, holding hands.
Right.
And we'll wait for the book. But it's such a great thing to see the Notre Dame Press bringing it to the forefront and having you on the cover, right? So I think it's a great thing. So we'll wait.
I think a lot of people are surprised. I know because people have told me that they're just truly amazed that Notre Dame Press took on a project of this nature. It's sort of kind of out of character with the university and kind of where it's put its emphasis in the past. And the fact that Notre Dame Press has now chosen this as a project to promote and to promote effectively surprises and pleases a lot of people. So this is the book, and I hope you can see the picture. It's called Gay, Catholic, and American. That's not my title for the book. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But so what that picture was taken as we came out of the court on decision day. And you can probably tell there's like a whole bunch of microphones there. There was a lot of press there. And there was a photographer named Molly Kaplan from the ACLU who had been assigned to us for a couple months as we led up to the decision day. And so Molly was there kind of shadowing us and taking pictures, and she took some extraordinary photos, but that was the best one. And as I was writing the book over like about a 2-year period, that was the picture that I always thought should be on the front of the book, because it just captures kind of the joy and the relief that we felt after that decision was rendered, because there was a lot of relief. There was no guarantee that lawsuit was going to be successful, right? I mean, it was the Windsor and Prop 8 cases passed 5-4. That's by the thinnest margin. And so with our case, which was more broad reaching, there was a chance we could lose. And so there was so much weight on our shoulders as we approached that case and went in for the decision. So when we came out, we were pretty happy, and I think that picture captures it.
We have our first question, Dan.
Oh, great.
So if you don't mind, well, we've got 2 questions. One, we want to know if you guys are going to be at the bookstore signing copies this fall.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Yes, as a matter of fact, let me tell you about that, because that's awesome. We were talking about Notre Dame Press and how they have done such an awesome job with this project and promoting the book. And, I love them. They surprised the heck out of me. I submitted the book to the Notre Dame Press thinking, they're going to toss this away and I'll have to, I'll go on to my next option. But they've been so enthusiastic and supportive. But the press has been fabulous. And they have arranged for me to do book signings on 2 football weekends this year. So I'll be at the Notre Dame bookstore on October 1st. That's for the Cincinnati game on the Friday afternoon. I don't know the times exactly, but I can post them. And then on November 19th, I'll be going back to do signings before the Georgia Tech game. So that's so cool. And they're going to have copies of the book available for sale in the bookstore, even any other time, then I'm not going to be there signing.
That's great. That's so cool, because you'll be in the lobby right when you walk in, right? It's to the right where everybody walks in. And
yeah, haven't you ever? I mean, every time I go, it's like there's always somebody there signing. Usually it's somebody important, not me. Right? So it's just remarkable that the university is going to give me, kind of that kind of a spotlight to be able to showcase this book
Twice.
Yeah, that's terrific. So
our second question, sorry, we do have a second question, and it is a little bit about the press. So you spoke to that some already, and we appreciate that. He was commenting that it's remarkable that, it was picked up by the press associated with, a Catholic university like that. Did they prepare you, and did you have predictable negative responses? Did they prepare you for those, or did you have any negative responses from the community? And how did they prepare you for that?
I did not have negative responses.
That's great.
As far as I know, they did not. I've asked a couple of times because I expected that they were going to be getting a lot of pushback internally, or that at some point someone would say, this is not the kind of project that we want to do or that we should be doing. To my knowledge, and based on what I've been told by the people at the press, that never happened. So, I mean, just one more of those experiences in my life where I'm just kind of pinching myself saying, I can't believe this. It's like, first of all, I can't believe they accepted it so enthusiastically. And then secondly, I can't believe that there hasn't been some kind of uproar over the publication of the book in the community. And apparently that's not the case. But, I'll also tell you that a couple of years ago, Michael and I and Jim Obergefell were on campus. The law school had us in to appear for an event, and we were prepared for all kinds of controversy and protests, and absolutely none of it happened. So I think a lot of times we build up these scenarios in our head, or things that might be or that might happen, and more often than not they turn out to be nothing.
So Greg,
you.
you were about to tell us the story of your title for the book.
Right. So I don't know. There was one night, so there was a Saturday night in 2016, Michael and I were in church, and it was like I often do during the Eucharistic prayer. I was just kind of nodding off, not paying attention. And we got to the point where there was a reference to a particular phrase, the fullness of charity. Lord, remember your church spread throughout this world and bring her to the fullness of charity. And for some reason, when I heard that phrase, I had an awakening, is the best way I can describe it, because it's like my head just sort of jerked, and I thought, wait a minute, what just happened? And so I just contemplated on that for quite a few weeks and thought about it and prayed on it a little bit. But I talk about it in the book, and I kind of explain it better than I am right now. But I think what that meant was that was my impetus to actually write this book, because I've been thinking about writing the book for a couple of years anyway. But it took that event really to kind of stimulate me and say, okay, this is something that you need to do. It's important, and let's get it done.
So what do you hope for the readers of your book?
I hope it gives them hope. Really, hope is what it's about, and courage to live their lives authentically, and to never feel like there's something that's out of reach. You know, when I was 19 years old in 1976 and I came out, it's like I didn't have a lot of hope and a lot of confidence that, you know, I would have a good, successful, happy life, right? It's just like that wasn't the expectation. But I mean, I look at the kind of things that, you know, we've been able to overcome together as a couple and a family. And I think if people read that story, it will give them hope that they can have that kind of a life too. They can have a relationship with the person they love. They can have a family. They can have a relationship with God. They can be part of a faith community. They can stay and remain Catholic. You know, all those things are possible because we've been able to do that throughout the course of our lives.
So this is your book is coming out September 1st. You'll be on campus October 1st and November 19th.
Right.
Is there another book in the works?
You know, actually been thinking about that a lot. So I'm hoping to retire from my job in the next 1 to 2 years. And one of the things that we folks at Gala have talked about over the years is the fact that there's so much oral history around the gay community and the whole queer community at Notre Dame that hasn't been captured. So there are so many people that I've talked to who were at Notre Dame in the 1960s and the 1970s and the 80s and beyond, who have so much history that hasn't been captured. It's like a little bit of oral history here and there. So I think the next project that I would like to try to do would be to capture some of that in written form while it's still possible, because none of us are getting any younger. You know, if you're talking about people who were there in the 60s, there's probably not a lot of them left. So that's something I think that I would really very much like to do.
Dan, we have another question that's actually quite poignant, if we can.
Sure. I see the question. Why don't we address that during the Q&A?
Okay.
So I'd like to thank the two of you for being here. What I'd like to do next, it's something that I've started doing this season, is a quick speed round of questions for you two, and then after that we'll get to the Q&A from the audience. So for the two of you, what is a memorable book that you've read?
I think the one I always go back to is Walden by Thoreau.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, mine is actually, I do genealogy, and one is I've got a 7th great grandfather who was secretary to a General DeLeon in Texas when it was part of New Spain, and it's like it's just a day in the life of this guy, you know, going, you know, having you know, prayer services, and you know, very it's very Catholic, it's very, you know, mission, you know, Spanish mission type thing, and it's just to know that this guy, it's a fiction book, but it's based on, you know, kind of, you know, in the 1600s, and that, to me, that was, you know, it's been one of my favorite books for a long time.
So besides being plaintiffs in a Supreme Court ruling, what would you consider your greatest accomplishment?
I would say raising these two kids, because, not every, just like any parent, everything doesn't work out perfectly. I guess for some people it does, but, we say to each other, boy, we raised two really good human beings, because, I mean, they are just, they've got big hearts, they're generous, they're fun to be around, so I think, and they give us a lot of, credit as well, for being the parents of how they've turned out, some of their best qualities. And so, to me, that's it right there.
I guess my perspective, I agree with all that, but the thing that I think is so important, other than the case, is the fact that we've been able to maintain our relationship for 40 years and to do it in plain sight, active in our church. So
Families.
With our families too, but I mean, being there at church, over our current parish, we've been members for almost 34 years, and we have changed so many hearts and minds just with our presence, showing up for church every week and being involved in different ministries, being active volunteers. That I think is probably, I think it's even more of an accomplishment than the Supreme Court case, because it's just we've been able to create a whole other layer of family and just change so many people's hearts and minds.
What is your favorite place on campus?
There's a down by the grotto, not the grotto, which I love, but there's a tree there, and it's, I don't know if I don't think it's a willow, but it's got a big fork on it. We used to take our kids there and they climbed on it when they were younger, but I did that because I used to like to go and hang out there. It's very peaceful. It's kind of looking at the lake on one side, the grotto on the other side. Very, very calm.
Yeah, mine is the Basilica, both inside and out, because I just almost fall down sometimes just because I just love looking up at the architecture and the statues and that on the outside, and then the inside is just breathtaking, and the feeling I have there is just wonderful.
If you could host a dinner party and bring 3 people, who would they be?
Dead or alive?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Well, love to have Pope Francis over. I think that'd be very interesting. Actually, I think I'd like to have our Archbishop here, Archbishop Kurtz. I think we've often not had the opportunity to talk in that type of a fashion. And I think it would be good to have him here. And then and Joni Mitchell, just for fun.
Great. Michael, do you have anybody to add?
No, I guess I would kind of do a political, maybe the Obamas, and I guess if I could have 4th, I actually like, I like Joe way before he ran for president, so maybe he and Jill as well. Just kind of get the 4 of them back to a reunion with them if we could do 4.
That's great. That's great. So where can people find and follow you on social media?
Well, active on Facebook, a little bit on Instagram. Check me out on LinkedIn. Also, you can follow what's going on with the UND Press if you're not familiar with them already. They've got a active program on social media. Got a great website too. You can go there, check out their books. You can order the book there if you choose to do that. But mostly on Facebook for me.
Yeah, gotcha. And Facebook and Instagram for me too. It's mostly pottery and gardening and just silly stuff. But yeah,
chasing squirrels.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, so I'd like to address some of the Q&A right now.
Sure.
And so we have somebody from the audience. What advice do you have to a young Catholic who is just coming out and is still facing the church's denial of blessing?
Well, we actually have to deal with that because we have some young people who approach us from time to time and looking for advice. And the best advice we can give is don't leave. As Michael always says, and we always say, if we leave, they win. So what we don't want to do is just walk away and not engage in the discussion. So for a young person, I would say, try not to leave. try to find a place that makes you feel welcome and home, and they're out there. So you can go I can tell you in our city of Louisville here, there's a lot of diversity in terms of the parishes, and not just on this particular topic, on any topic. There's a whole range of spectrum of churches that are progressive or conservative and everything in between. So I would say keep looking for a place that feels right and fits for you. Ask somebody for a recommendation, but please keep trying. We've never walked away from our faith. We've been practicing our whole lives. I can't say it's always been easy, but it's been important. And we're glad we stuck around.
We've always taken the approach too that our faith, the value we put in our faith, that overrides anybody's external, view of what our faith should be, because our faith is very strong internally, and we let that internal faith, pull us through, push us through, whatever. I mean, that's key for both of us, that we know the external is there and the negative is there, but we're not going to give up on our faith. That's something, we talk about this a lot. We both feel like we were born into it, that was a blessing from God for both of us and our families.
That's great. Well, it's very heartwarming to hear the two of you being mentors to others so actively, within your community, and thank you for that. It's great to see. We have another question from the audience. How difficult was it to come out to your families?
Well, it was difficult, especially if you're talking about the 1970s and 80s. One thing I will point out for people of our generation, coming out was very different back in those days. It's not like you could make a single post on social media and have the whole world know, in a heartbeat. It's like it had to be done very intentionally, very slowly, very deliberately, basically one person at a time. And so when I say I came out in 1976, it's like I came out over a period of years to different people when I had the opportunity to have the conversations with them, in a safe and meaningful way. So that was then, and it really doesn't relate much to the way things are now. But it was challenging because we didn't know what kind of a response we would get. We could have been rejected by our families, but we were not. We didn't get thrown out. We didn't get shunned. Quite the opposite. We were very fortunate.
Our families actually became very close. Our parents just loved they were very close. There was a bit of an age difference. My dad was Vietnam era and his dad was World War II. So my dad was in awe of, what his dad did in World War II. But, our family, for the most part, is very, very acceptant. I had some gay cousins who kind of came before me, and the matriarch in my dad's family, she really set the stage, for us to be comfortable and out, and she told one of my cousins, she goes, I like them a whole lot better than I like you. I think it was her own son she told that to, but it's kind of nice when you have the matriarch in the family kind of set the stage as far as acceptance for for us. And it was a nice, when our parents were both alive, they, my parents lived on a farm, so his parents would call us and say, "Are y'all going to the farm anytime? We want to take a ride," and so, and my mom was always up to cook something, or my dad grill something. Those were some good times when we were all four of our parents were together, and us.
I know people have misconceptions about, Kentucky and what it's like to be here, but, especially in the cities like in Louisville and Lexington, people are very progressive. And so even, in the 70s and 80s, I think there was kind of this feeling of acceptance that was growing for queer people. And we've come a long way since then.
Yeah, Greg and I used to joke that both of our parents probably they had at least one concession. Well, they didn't marry a good Catholic girl, but at least they got a good Catholic boy.
It's all the family, right? So,
Right.
So at Notre Dame, Greg, at Notre Dame, you had come out already, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
you come out a few years before. What was being on campus like for you then?
It was different for me because that was where I really kind of felt some of my first community, gay community. There was an organization, a loose organization of students, and we would meet every day in South Dining Hall and have meals together. So that was new to me, to be able to actually have gay friends. That was my first opportunity at Notre Dame. So we would go in, 3 meals a day. I'd be eating with 2 to 10 other gay students, which was remarkable. That was nice. It was frustrating though, because even in those days when we tried to start a gay student group that would be recognized, we were denied that, as were many generations after me, right? So it took a long time for that finally, to come about. But it was difficult. It was also liberating though, to be actually having the opportunity to have gay friends for a change.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Could you hold up the book once again? The book is Gay, Catholic, and American by Greg Burke and published by Notre Dame Press. Thank you, Michael DeLeon, Greg Burke, for being here. What an inspirational conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan, for having us, and happy Pride, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And so thank you to the audience for joining this evening. Thank you for the questions from the audience. This has been another episode of Racial and Social Justice Beyond the Dome. Technical direction by Lily Crawford and Marilee Williams. I'm Dan Yu, and this has been a production of the Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh. Follow us at ND Pit Club on Facebook, Twitter, ndpitclub.com, and Notre Dame Pit Club on Instagram. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening and go Irish.
Yeah.